Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this narration of the web series Wearing Power Armor to a Magic School. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 47, A Heart to Heart. Despite the titles, despite the pomps and circumstance, an end of all assemblies seemed to be a universal cultural phenomena that transcended not just species but entire universes. As immediately after the ensemble of musicians had played their final tune following the dean's parting words, and the curtain on stage had drawn to a full close, chaos soon found itself erupting in the form of chatter and gossip within the audience. 100 different conversations started all at once, giving the EVI a run for its money as it began tirelessly isolating and sorting through each and every conversation as best it could. Hundreds of lines of dialogues now dotted my HUD, each of them unique in their own right, but all of them tended towards three distinct topics. One being the library and the mysterious student responsible for slighting it. Two being Oris's magical ass-whooping at the hands of my library card. And three being the library card itself, and by extension, me. It was this latter topic that all conversations seemed to eventually circle towards. Like the black hole of a drama I was in, it seemed as if I was trapping more and more of the undivided attention of an entire year group within my insatiable gravity well. What started out as a few scattered eyes occasionally glancing over towards our group suddenly became an all-out wave of 100 different constant stares that seemed destined to swallow us whole. The sentiment was more than less confirmed by Thassia, as her expression said it all. "Emma, it would be prudent if we made our departure post-haste," the princess whispered out, loud enough that I could note the undercurrent of concern present in her voice. And when it came to anything related to nobility, I knew to trust Thassia's judgment. She'd spent her whole life dealing with their petty affairs after all. So I began scanning for exit routes in earnest, or rather, I delegated the task to the EVI, who was indefinitely way more adept at this sort of thing, especially when the seconds counted. "EV, exit routes." "Affirmative, highlighting routes now." With only a handful of pawns to choose from, I opted for the one with the least resistance. I instinctively took a point, with the rest of the gang following suit. Looking one of my rear-view cameras, I noted how Thalman was being particularly wary of Ulanor as he kept him close at hand. Quite literally, in fact, with his hand never once deviating from the Venerian's shoulder. This was definitely a step up from his wariness over Ulanor from before, which meant there was definitely something up, something that I'd bring up with him when we got to the dorms. As we made our way out, a handful of students somehow managed to make their way through the crowd, having managed to blip forward by a good 10 or so feet. Alert, localized surge mana radiation detected, 340% above background radiation levels, cutting us off just short of the doors. Entity if confirmed, A72 Ethelon Acela, Rentalus Realm Neutral. "Please, a moment of your time." The small group was led by a short ferret who participated in the verbal matchup between Quiv and Oris from the previous night, and was the one to speak first. He stared up at me, though clearly intimidated by Thalman's presence in addition to my stature. "I would just like to request an audience with you, Earthrealmer, whenever you may have the chance to do so." He spoke out of a series of fast-paced chatters, his voice quite literally matching up with his small yet adorably proportioned form. "Please let me know when would be most appropriate." "Thank you." He scurried off soon after, back into the crowds, blending into the mass of students. In the time it took for Ethelon to address me, the crowd had just stopped for a good 5 feet short of our group. The 100 or so voices blended into an incomprehensible mess at this point, as each student tried throwing question after question at me, resulting in little less progress for any individual question getting through. Only a few stray students refused to join in, the most notable group of this being Quiv and his entourage, who seemed to study us from afar near the front row of the auditorium. The gaunt-like lizard's eyes looked not too amused at the antics I was causing, or perhaps the attention I was inadvertently garnering, and the spotlight I was taking away from him. Eventually, a single voice boomed from the crowd from one student that formed a sort of cone with their hands over their mouth, managing to overpower all others and causing the whole room to go silent for a few precious seconds. "Alert, localized surge of mana radiation detected, 120% above background radiation levels." How did you get the library card, you robber? This once more put me in a unique opportunity, as I had yet another chance to address the crowd. This deceptively simple question demanded an equally simple answer that needed to work as my last word in the argument, to stroke further interest, but more importantly, to further break down preconceptions of my new Roma status. This was one of those moments where less would be more. By the librarian offering me one, that's how, I answered matter-of-factly, and with an unseen wink underneath my helmet, before turning around and dipping through those double doors, leaving a whole crowd in turmoil. Dragon's Heart Tower, Level 23, Residence 30, local time 1400 hours. Emma Booker. We arrived at the door without much in the way of fanfare. To be honest, I was at least expecting some sort of buzz from the auditorium to follow us out of it, maybe even in the form of a vintage 21st century paparazzi chase. However, according to Thatcher, that simply wasn't part of the decorum. Apparently, it was more socially acceptable to put our foot in the door if everyone else was doing it, like the literal stampede back in the assembly hall. However, things were different when you were alone and lacked that social net to bank on. We were still more or less outcasts in the greater scheme of the Academy's social hierarchy, after all, so to have someone actively attempt to chase after us would be seen as a bridge too far. It would have basically made them look really desperate, which certainly wasn't a good look. This was despite the library card coming into play, given how the dust from that whole reveal just hadn't had enough time to settle yet. Whatever the case was, and whatever the social intricacies entailed, I was glad that we were finally back in the dorms. But that relief was sorely short-lived as Dalman, not so subtly, tugged my arm, indicating he wanted to speak, in private. This meant leaving Eleanor and Thatcher alone for a while, and whilst I wasn't worried about their pair existing in the same room, it just occurred to me how little I saw of their interaction so far. Between Dalman and myself, Eleanor more or less left Thatcher alone, save for the odd tainted jab, which still boiled my blood to no end, but I had to tolerate it for now, as I shuffled into Dalman's room with only a knowing glance exchanged with the likes of Thatcher. Dragon's Heart Tower, Level 23, Residence 30, Eleanor and Dalman's bedroom, local time 14:05 hours. Emma Booker. Emma, there is a matter we need to discuss, Dalman began, his tone bordering between respectful yet urgently paced. I'm all ears, Dalman, I replied without hesitation. I'll make this brief. While I was in the process of procuring Eleanor's presents for the assembly, I arrived to find the room empty and bare. There was no trace of the Venerian, nothing I could see with my eyes, and nothing I could sense with my mana streams. There it was again, the mana streams. Wait, empty? Empty and bare. So did he run away or something? How'd you manage to track him down in time for the assembly? No, he was here, merely hidden within the domicile, Dalman quickly corrected. Wait, so how'd you figure out that he was in here? Didn't you say that he was completely hidden from sight? Correct, and completely hidden from mana streams? I waved my hands around, attempting to mimic the flow of mana in the best way I could. Ironically, using the exact gestures Eleanor had used a few days prior when he derided my inability to sense the ebb and flow of mana around me. That is also correct. Then how'd you manage to track him down? I used my inherent investigative abilities. I cocked my head in response to that, to which Dalman quickly clarified. I used the investigative abilities inherent to my species. I cocked my head the other way, which prompted Dalman to sigh, huffing out a large, exasperated breath. Seeing as we were reaching a roadblock, I decided to broach the topic directly in order to cut through the awkwardness of the situation. So did you, now I'm not sure if I'm going to be offensive or anything like, but did you sniff him out? This resulted in nearly the opposite desired effect. The Lupanon mercenary prince averted his gaze the moment I spoke the word out loud, and if he had cheeks to redden, I was sure he'd be all but blushing right now. His ears betrayed it all, lying flat in the well-groomed fur on his head. His tail fared no better, having since shifted from a confident straight edge angle to a curved shape and bent more naturally towards one side of his leg, short of coating around it. This is a matter of great contest within my realm, Emma, Dalman spoke through the audible growl, as he attempted to make up for the betrayal of his body's natural cues with practiced, gravelly tone of voice befitting a mercenary prince. I really shouldn't have brought it up, I managed out awkwardly in response. I'm genuinely really sorry, Dalman. I didn't mean to cause any offense or overstep my boundaries. It's just that, I sort of assumed that since you have the features that resemble, I paused, not sure how I'd bring up the dogs and wolves to what looked like their distant humanoid cousin. You see, we have a species that uncannily resembles yours in our realm, and they're usually renowned and respected and lauded and well regarded in every sense of the word for their abilities to utilize their sense of smell. And I just thought, stop. Thalman halted my ramblings with a sudden, guttural bark. Yet it wasn't aggressive. This bark wasn't the same one used on Eleanor. It was more of an inquisitive one made to get attention, but without intent of offend. You said your realm has these beings with similar features, and you'd laud them for it. Do you not find such features on sapient beings to be a similar vein, degrading or animal-like? I cocked my head at that, as if to emphasize my confusion at that question. No. Why? The only reason I brought it up is because I thought it was a really cool, if not downright tactically beneficial gift befitting the martial traditions of your realm. Again, I apologize if that was in any way offensive, Thalman. No. Thalman interrupted once more, except this time he didn't shout, he didn't bark, he didn't do anything so much as raise his voice. Thank you, Emma. Wait, what? Perhaps this is a matter best saved for another time, but I appreciate your candid nature. The Lupanar smiled at me in appreciation. Suffice it to say, I am not offended in the slightest, and I am grateful for your appreciation of this natural, as you say it, gift of my kind. I haven't yet heard anyone outside of my own kin that openly regards it as such. We exchanged a genuinely friendly look for a few moments before Thalman continued on with his discussions on Eleanor. On the topic of my inherent abilities, Thalman seemed intent on using that phrasing, which I didn't mind, nor wished to dwell on. I did not find him utilizing his scent. Moreover, the Venerian was likewise absent from the sense of the room as well. The only reason I was able to find it was because of this. The Lupanar walked over to what I could only describe as a pile of soft things, as the wolf rummaged around, only to find nothing. Wait, Thalman barked out in confusion, as he began rummaging, practically throwing plush after plush out from the nesting pile. He was here when I arrived, he continued, as his relentless assault on the poor defenseless plushies, until finally the pile had been all but dispersed. Nothing was left, except for a small, charred-out piece of what was presumably, at one point, paper. It was larger when I first uncovered it. No matter, Thalman muttered out, before pointing to it vehemently. When I arrived, I found 2 burnt letters by scent. The first piece I found underneath the Venerian's nesting pile, which is seemingly disappearing despite there being no more flames to consume it, Thalman observed curiously, before pointing towards the countertop and yet another burnt-out letter. The second was the letter sent to all dormitories announcing the emergency assembly. He burnt both using his breath, which means he left a scent trail leading straight to where he hid. The Lupanar traced out the path leading to the second-floor loft, towards one of the closets. There he inexplicably reappeared back into reality. His scent was restored, and so was his presence in the manor field. With a steady breath, Thalman prepared to lead into what seemed to be a natural conclusion to his observations. These inexplicable developments can only mean one thing. I believe that the Venerian possesses some sort of magical artifact that hides him from everything, sight, sound, smell, manor fields, and everything else in between, I quickly interjected, my mind going towards the same conclusion, which I couldn't help but butt my way into. Thalman's eyes narrowed at me curiously, as if he was shocked by my ability to piece this magical mystery together. Correct. I assume that you came to the same conclusion from your experiences with the Venerian in the armory. I nodded. Yep. But I'm going to do you one better. I'm going to assume that during your altercation with him, he either dropped that blanket of his or made an effort to take it with him to the assembly. It was Thalman's turn to nod, as it was clear that we were both on the same page. Correct. Which leads me to assume that you are coming to the similar conclusion as I, that his peculiar and uncharacteristically unstately obsession with that piece of fabric was done out of practical necessity. For this legendary artifact granting him complete invisibility from all the senses is none other than this unassuming piece of cloth. It was at this point we were both nodded in mutual agreement, grinning proudly at our decidedly basic detective work. Which now leads us to even more questions, I pressed on, carrying forward the momentum of the conversation. Where did he get the blanket? How did he get the blanket? And more importantly, why did he feel the need to prep his blanket during the assembly? I believe I may have an answer for that latter question, Emma, Thalman offered, to which I nodded, giving him my go-ahead to continue. Prior to leaving, the Venerian presented me with an ultimatum. He would only agree to attend the assembly under the condition that I guarantee his safety. My eyes couldn't help but grow wide at that, as everything started coming together. Now, given what we've learned from the assembly, I believe it isn't too hard to piece together just why he might have been hesitant to attend, Thalman concluded. There were only two big announcements at the assembly: the explosion in town, which was more or less glossed over, and then the library situation. I paused, sighed, as I attempted to pinch the bridge of my nose, bonking my helmet in the process. That must have been what he was up to at the library during our whole tango with the Null. He must have done something to the library to cause the whole clusterfuck, I offered, to which Thalman could only nod yet again in agreement. Getting a bit more common there with your word choice, Emma, our first realm, but your point is certainly still stands, Thalman responded with a hint of levity, which was definitely needed, given the implications of this whole thing was leading up to. And I'll continue to let things slip, at least within the confines of the storm, I chuckled back, before heading seamlessly back into the deep end. Right, this leaves us with a hypothesis that Eleanor is responsible for whatever happened in the library, and prime suspect for tomorrow's investigation. This also leaves us with several questions still unanswered, and while I'd be glad to sit here and theorize away with you, Thalman, I think we should just cut to the chase by pressing for answers straight from the source. Thalman's eyes couldn't have grown to a more agreeable state at my little proclamation. I'm going to redeem our little meeting token we agreed upon back in the armory, and I'm going to use it to get to the bottom of things. The mercenary prince walked back up close to me, and with a hearty laugh, he slapped me hard right between where my shoulder blades should be. That's the spirit, if only more of the upper echelons had this sort of go-getter attitude. We'd be in places by now. You certainly have heaven-broken zeal in you, Emma. It's, honestly quite jarring to see, and not at all what I expected to find here in the Nexus of all places. But I am happy that the fates of the bind dictate our paths cross like this. The wolf grinned out excitedly, which I reciprocated underneath my helmet, despite the prince being unable to see it. Have to ask, are all Earthrealmers like this? Oh, some, not all. Let's just say they probably sent me here for my go-getter attitude, I guess, I offered, before turning my sights towards the door, and a blue thing that had a long question and answer session ahead of him. I hope you're ready, Eleanor. Dragon's Heart Tower, Level 23, Residence 30, Living Room, Local Time 14:25. Emma Booker. Eleanor was decidedly not ready, as he found him splayed out on the couch in front of Thasia, having seemingly consumed an entire platter of breakfast-themed sweets, while the Avenant looked on in polite horror. Both Thalman and I immediately turned to face Thasia for answers. Thasia, the Avenant, as usual, had all the answers we needed. Lord Rularia seems to have taken an overconsumption to alleviate the stresses plaguing him, Emma. She gestured to the mass of blue that now practically sank into the soft upholstery of the sofa. We were only talking for what? I checked my HUD's chronograph before continuing seamlessly. 20 minutes? Lord Rularia mentioned that he was feeling particularly stressed and was famished as a result. All three of our eyes landed on the incapacitated Venerian, as I decided that enough was enough, and walked up right to him. All right, that's enough silliness for one day. Come on, I spoke sternly. And when that didn't work, I began poking him. This roused the small thing somewhat, enough that he began to stir, but not enough for him to wake up from his food coma. Eleanor, wake up! The small thing jumped up, this sudden leap ending with him landing right on my shoulder as before, my exopack acting as a convenient seat for him, much to my chagrin. We need to talk in private now, I demanded, with little room for negotiations as I began taking the initiative by walking out of the living room and back towards the dorm, making sure that the Venerian had little to no room to weasel his way out of this one. Dragonheart's Tower, Level 23, Residence 30, Eleanor and Thalman's bedroom, local time 14:30, Emma Booker. Taking a page out of Thalman's book and making sure to walk him forward with a hand secured around his shoulders, we entered his domicile without any issue. Eleanor, I began with a solid, stoic tone of voice, shifting away from the colloquial, casual tone from the interactions with Thalman. I believe now is as good a time as any to resume where we left off that night, and considering the circumstances, I momentarily shifted my attention to the burnt-out letter in the corner of the room, hinting at the fact that I knew more than I was letting on. I don't think there's going to be an opportunity to delay this any further. So, are you ready to talk? Ready is a relative state of affairs, New Realmer, the Venerian began, reaching an arm over and to the other, clenching the fabric of his cloak tight between his fingers. A state of affairs as dynamic as the circumstances that seem to so eager to evolve on the whims of fate. So yes, let us talk. Let us exchange all of that there is to exchange before the inevitable conclusion to my story. I couldn't help but be taken completely off guard by the latter statement, but pushed on regardless, just to explain what's going on, Eleanor. You will have to be more specific with your line of question, New Realmer. What exactly are you involved in? I interjected. Last we chatted, I asked about the specifics of the stunt you pulled in the armory. Now it seems like those are questions pale in comparison to the extent of what's been happening behind our peer group's backs. I paused, readjusting the angle of attack to take into account Thasia's prior discussions about peer group dynamics and the necessity of maintaining cohesion to prevent a divide and conquer scenario from the outside forces. So I'm asking you now as a fellow member of our peer group, tell me what's been going on. If you want specifics, sure. Tell me why you've been sneaking around. Tell me what is up with your whole stunt in the armory. Tell me how you got that invisibility cloak and why you even have it to begin with. Tell me about the burnt letters. Tell me about your hesitancy in going to the assembly today or in leaving the room at all. Tell me enough. Eleanor finally put his foot down, with nostrils quite literally flaring. His typical tone of voice, all but gone at that point, replaced with one coated with severity and devoid of most pretenses. It felt even more genuine than that brief glimpse at the regular conversation following the debacle in the armory. You've made your point, New Realmer. You've made your point. Trails of smoke escaped from his maw as he composed himself. The Venerian's voice carried with it an unhealthy mix of dread and anxiety. It took him a few seconds, but he eventually regained his composure before pointing to a pair of plush armchairs. No verbal prompting was needed as we both made our way towards them, Eleanor plopping himself atop one, whilst I elected to stand just across from him, for obvious reasons. There. Alert localized search matter radiation detected, 210% above background radiation levels. Perhaps you should be able to sit now. I had to do a double take at what I just witnessed. The Venerian, for the very first time, actually offered me something, and a courtesy at that. Cautiously, and with a great deal of suspicion, I decided to take it, sitting down on the magically reinforced chair. Now, if you excuse me for being so brazen, it's about time you noticed what. You'll be pleasantly surprised to know that all of this does not require an explanation befitting of the lengthy nothingness of the expectant decorum. He immediately went off, diving straight into the different tangent. In fact, there is a singular thread which weaves together all of these seemingly disconnected points on this tapestry of intrigue. He took a deep breath, staring at me, his eyes seemingly attempting to gain some type of purchase on the pupils hidden behind the opaque lenses. He hesitated for a moment, as if considering his next words very carefully before pressing on. You remember, I did everything. Every decision I made, every action I initiated was done because I was under contract. That extracurriculars, the debacle in the armory, all of this was my doing, but none of it was of my choosing. It all started coming together. The strangeness, the seemingly nonsensical actions and aloofness, all of it now had a sense of direction. But before my mind could fully grapple the revelation, a certain choice of words irked me enough to shift directions. To use the word was, past tense. Did something change? The blue thing grinned back, seemingly satisfied at my deductions. So you really are paying attention? He nodded. That is correct, New Realmer. Circumstances have, in fact, changed. For as it stands, I find myself as signatory to an unwanted agreement, beholden to a contract without a master, which is why we are here discussing this matter freely, without the stranglehold of contractual obligation preventing me from partaking in the privileges inherent to my station. So you're free from the mysterious benefactor, I proclaimed. Precisely, Eleanor replied, or rather hissed out, not too gleefully. You don't seem all too pleased about it, I observed out loud. How could I be, Nurse Ralmer? I understand that you may be lacking in experience in such social intricacies due to your realm's backwardness, so I will try my best to be brief in my explanations. Whilst the cessation of the contract means that I am, by your own words, free, this freedom travels in both directions. It is a freedom from, but also a freedom to. I am now both free from its controlling obligations, But by that same reasoning, I am also free to be judged for my actions without any of its protections. Eleanor spoke darkly, his features a distinct mix of equal parts frustration and despair. And I am assuming you need its protections because of what you did in the library. I responded without mincing any of my words, causing the Venerian's expression to rapidly darken. That is why you were so scared to leave the room today, right? That's also why you tried your best to hide from the assembly when it was announced. And that's also why you brought your little invisibility blanket to the assembly, just in case. They hit the Venerian with an accusation after accusation, leaving him no room to squirm. Am I wrong? No, you are very much correct, B-Robbo. So what exactly did you do? What exactly happened in the library? The Venerian's maw began moving, yet nothing audible emerged. His lips trembled as he stopped to regain his bearings, his eyes squeezing shut as he held both armrests tight between his little hands. A birding, Eleanor managed meekly, practically whispering those words out. My eyes went wide at that revelation, and whilst this would have been bad enough as if it happened in any regular old library, the fact that this happened to the library of all places was enough to send shivers down my spine. Eleanor, what the fuck did you do? I burned them, an entire section's worth, using dragon's breath and ancient sorcery to ensure a permanent scar, he elaborated with a pained expression, eyes darting to shy away from the helmet's unchanging visage. 1,001 questions flooded me, but only one out of all of it then managed to come through. But why? I was commanded to do so under contract, he retorted, was filled with a growing irritation. But why? Who would? Why would anyone want to burn books in the library? It doesn't make any sense. Because of you, New Realmer, Eleanor shot back with a seething, frustrated hiss. It was because of you. End of chapter. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Bushmaster 177, HenryTheRed, Casper Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon W.R.E, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.